Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into a case that really gripped Australia in 2024, the disappearance of Samantha Murphy in Ballarat, Victoria. It's a sensitive topic, of course, a tragedy.
Absolutely. And our goal here isn't speculation. We want to guide you, our listener, through the official record, using the facts from the sources we have. We'll focus purely on the timeline, the forensic clues, the evidence that emerged.
Yeah, and it's a case defined by a real paradox, isn't it? You have this awful, but initially seemingly straightforward situation. A 51-year-old woman, a mother, goes for her usual morning run on February 4th, 2024.
A very routine activity.
Exactly, and she just vanishes into the bushland near her home. That part, unfortunately, feels familiar in missing persons cases.
But what happens next is where this case really diverges. Despite this huge, weeks-long physical search, covering acres and acres of pretty dense Australian bush, they find nothing, no body, very little physical evidence initially.
And yet, remarkably quickly, the police shift gears. They declare the case suspicious, make an arrest, and actually charge a 22-year-old, Patrick Orrin Stevenson, with murder. All without having found Samantha.
That's the core paradox. You've got this massive boots-on-the-ground physical search coming up empty, completely contrasted by the power of tiny digital signals, phone pings, GPS data from her running watch. That's what cracked it open.
It's fascinating, forensically speaking. How reliable did that digital data have to be for police to move towards a murder charge without the victim's body, which is usually, the cornerstone?
It suggests the technical data points were strong enough to establish probable cause, even with that huge piece of physical evidence missing. It almost feels like the investigation worked backwards in a way. The digital evidence pointed to the suspect, and then that helped redefine the search.
Okay, let's really unpack this then. How did the data from a running watch essentially become more decisive than the physical search effort? And what made this case, as one forensic psychologist put it, very unusual? We need to follow those digital breadcrumbs.
Right. So we'll move chronologically. We'll start with the last known sighting, walk through the initial search, then the technical investigation, and finally the legal developments that followed.
Let's set the scene first. To really grasp the shockwaves this sent through the community, you need to understand Samantha Murphy's life and the setting.
Absolutely. Samantha Murphy was 51, deeply rooted in the Ballarat community. Sources describe her as Caucasian, about 173 centimeters tall, that's 5'8", slim build, shoulder-length blonde hair.
And importantly, living a very stable, very structured life. She wasn't transient or someone likely to just disappear.
Exactly. And Ballarat itself, it's a significant regional city, but it's right up against these large areas of bushland, like Woo-Kurrung Regional Park. So you have this interface between urban life and, well, the wilderness.
Which is precisely where the story unfolds.
Her stability really stands out. Mother of 3. Ran a small business with her husband, Michael, very close to their home. This wasn't someone likely to, run off or cut ties suddenly. Her life was centered right there. Family, home, work.
That background immediately makes explanations like deciding to leave voluntarily seem very unlikely to investigators.
It does. And there's a really poignant detail mentioned in the sources, highlighting the ongoing agony for the family. They marked her 52nd birthday in April 2024. That was just 2 months after she went missing.
God, that really brings home the human cost, doesn't it? A family just suspended in uncertainty, waiting for answers while marking these milestones.
It underscores the reality behind the forensic data points we'll be discussing. A family relying entirely on this investigation for closure while living through this prolonged night.
And the events leading up to that day were just so ordinary. That contrast makes it even more jarring.
Well, the night before, February 3rd, she was having dinner at home with her husband, Michael, and some friends. And sources say she talked about her plans for the next morning.
Which were?
A specific fitness goal. She planned to run 14 kilometers, that's about 8.7 miles, and she intended to run it through the local bushland, specifically within Woo-Kurrung Regional Park.
So her intention was known. That's vital for investigators, right? They didn't have a guess where she might have gone.
Precisely. Her planned route and distance gave them a clear geographical starting point for that initial physical search. That was crucial before the digital evidence began to paint a different picture.
And we have a very tight timeline for her last confirmed sighting.
Yes, CCTV footage captured her leaving her home, actually in the driveway, at approximately 7 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time on February 4th, heading out for that run.
7 a.m. That's the starting pistol for this incident window. And the alarm wasn't raised much later.
No, just 4 hours later. She was expected at a family event around 11 a.m. When she didn't show up for that prearranged gathering, That's when the family knew something was wrong. They contacted the police immediately and reported her missing.
So, police are working with a tight 4-hour window, 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. They know the intended location, Wu Karon Park, and they know her specific activity, a solo run. That's a relatively focused start for a missing persons case.
It is. And that defined time frame, combined with the known route, meant that when the initial searches in that expected area turned up absolutely nothing, investigators could quickly pivot away from assuming it was just an accident or her getting lost. The possibility of outside intervention had to be considered much sooner.
Okay, so the alert is raised, the family is worried, police are notified. What happens next is this huge, visible response.
Right, the initial response was immense. This wasn't just a couple of officers walking a trail. It transitioned rapidly from a missing person report to a full-blown search and rescue operation, and then fairly quickly into...
Tell us about the scale. Who was involved?
It was a major multi-agency effort led by Victoria Police. And they brought in their specialists, the search and rescue squad, obviously, but also the dog squad for scent tracking, the mounted branch police on horseback, good for covering rugged terrain, and the air wing for aerial searches.
That's a serious mobilization of resources.
Absolutely. And they weren't alone. They had crucial support from community-based agencies, too. The Victoria State Emergency Service, the SES, they were vital for coordinating the ground teams. Parks Victoria provided that essential local knowledge of the park's trails and terrain. And even the Country Fire Authority, the CFA, was involved.
And all this manpower, all these resources, initially focused where?
Right where she intended to be. Wu Karon Regional Park and the adjacent bushland areas. That was the logical starting point based on her plan.
But Wu Karong isn't just a small park, is it? It's significant bushland.
It is. It's dense. It can be rugged. Conducting a thorough grid search there is a massive challenge, even with all those resources. Visibility can be poor, terrain uneven. It's easy to miss things.
And despite this huge effort, the initial days yielded nothing.
Essentially, yes. And after several days of this intensive searching, the police made two really critical announcements that changed everything. First, they formally ruled out the possibility that she had suffered a medical episode, like a heart attack or a bad fall, and had simply collapsed somewhere within that main search area.
The thinking being, if that had happened, the sheer number of searchers would likely have found her, or at least some signed clothing, her watch, something.
Precisely. The lack of any discovery pointed away from that. And the second finding was just as important. They also ruled out the idea that she had voluntarily left the area, that she'd walked out or arranged to be picked up and just disappeared on her own terms.
Based on her background, her family ties, her known plans, that just didn't fit.
Correct. So you rule out medical emergency, you rule out voluntary departure. What's left?
Foul play. External intervention.
Exactly. That became the primary working hypothesis. The investigation fundamentally shifted from search and rescue to a potential criminal matter.
So how long did this intense physical search phase last before that shift?
About 5 days. After 5 days of that massive effort yielding no results in the primary zone, the large-scale bushland search was formally scaled back. That's when the investigation was officially handed over to the Specialist Missing Persons Squad.
A procedural step, but one that signals this is now seen as a complex, likely criminal case requiring long-term investigation.
Definitely. The focus shifted from finding a potentially lost or injured person to finding out what happened to her.
And with the physical search scaling back, the focus must have intensified dramatically on the technology she was carrying.
Immensely. Her mobile phone and her Apple Watch became the absolute center of the investigation at that point.
Okay, let's take the phone first. What did it tell him?
Her mobile phone registered a connection. It pinged a cellular tower located in Banyunyang. Now, Banyunyang is roughly 14 kilometers, or about 8.7 miles south of her home.
Which is interesting because 14 kilometers was her intended running distance. Does that suggest she reached her goal or was near it?
It suggests she, or at least her phone, was in that general vicinity, yes. It roughly aligns with the distance she planned. However, there's a crucial technical point here about interpreting a single tower ping.
Okay, explain that. What are the limitations?
Well, a phone connects to the tower, providing the strongest signal. If investigators only know it connected to one specific tower, they only know the phone was somewhere within that tower's coverage area. In a regional place like Banyunyang, that coverage area or cell sector could be quite large, potentially several square kilometers.
Ah, so it doesn't pinpoint her to a specific street or trail marker. It just puts her phone somewhere in the Banyunyang region, around the time of that last signal.
Exactly. It confirms the general neighborhood, the broad geographical area, but it lacks precision. You typically need signals connecting to multiple towers simultaneously to triangulate a much more accurate location. So the single ping was a clue, a direction, but not the X marks the spot.
Got it. So useful but broad. What about the Apple Watch? Did that provide more detail?
The Apple Watch was significant in a different way. Sources confirmed she was wearing it, but the key finding was what didn't happen. The SOS function on the watch was not activated.
And that function can be triggered how? Manually by the wearer or sometimes automatically?
Both. You can trigger it manually in an emergency. And some models have fall detection. If the watch senses a hard fall followed by inactivity, it can automatically trigger an SOS call and message to emergency contacts.
So the fact it wasn't activated is telling?
Highly telling. It suggests a couple of possibilities. Either whatever happened was so sudden, so fast, she had absolutely no time or opportunity to manually trigger the SOS, or the nature of the event wasn't a typical fall that the watch's sensors would recognize and automatically trigger for.
Both of those scenarios seem to point away from a simple accident or medical event and more towards
A sudden external intervention, an attack, an abduction, something abrupt that prevented her using the safety feature or didn't register as a standard fall.
Okay, now this feels like the real turning point we discussed earlier. The GPS data from the watch itself.
Yes. This is where the digital trail becomes incredibly specific. Analysis of the GPS data, likely from her running app, synced with the watch, showed her progress. She had run approximately 7 kilometers.
7 kilometers, that's exactly half her intended 14K distance.
Precisely halfway. And the data showed she ran those 7 kilometers through Wuwukurong Regional Park, reaching a specific location known as Mount Clear.
Mount Clear. So the GPS tracks her movement consistently up to that point.
Yes, a clear path showing her run. But it was at that 7-kilometer mark at Mount Clear that investigators found something they described as an anomaly or a disturbance in the GPS data stream.
Anomaly. Disturbance. Those words are loaded. What does that actually mean in terms of the data? What would that look like on a map or a data log for you, the listener?
Okay, think about a normal GPS track for a runner. You'd see a continuous line of data points, moving at a runner's pace, maybe 8, 10, 12 kilometers per hour, slowing down on hills, maybe pausing briefly. Consistent.
Makes sense.
An anomaly or disturbance breaks that pattern abruptly and unnaturally. It could be several things. It might show the device's speed suddenly jumping from running pace to, say, 40 or 60 kilometers per hour, moving along a road rather than a trail. That would strongly suggest the person, or at least the device, was suddenly put into a vehicle.
Right. An impossible acceleration for a runner.
Or it could be a sudden, sharp stop in the data mid-stride, inconsistent with just taking a break, followed perhaps by erratic, sharp movements, or maybe the signal abruptly cutting out entirely in a way that doesn't suggest battery drain, but maybe interference or the device being stopped or destroyed.
So the GPS didn't just fade out. The pattern of the data points right at that 7-kilometer mark at Mount Clear indicated something unnatural happened, a disruption to her run.
Exactly. It wasn't just the end of the data, it was the way the data ended or changed. That specific 0.7 kilometers Mount Clear became the digital equivalent of a crime scene marker. It pinpointed the exact location where her run was unnaturally interrupted.
That's huge. It transforms the investigation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's no longer about searching the entire park for someone who might have collapsed anywhere. It's about focusing intensely on that spot.
Absolutely. It provided the critical focus. The investigation wasn't just looking for a missing person anymore. It was looking for evidence of what happened to that person at that precise location and time, suggested by the watch data.
This technical finding must have been the catalyst for formally reclassifying the case.
Certainly seems that way. Remember, the massive physical search concluded after 5 days, having ruled out accident or voluntary disappearance in that primary zone.
And the missing persons squad took over.
Yes, confirming this was now a complex, long-haul investigation. And then came the public shift. By February 23rd, so less than 3 weeks after she vanished, the police made a very significant public statement.
What did they say?
They stated publicly that they suspected Samantha Murphy was deceased. That's a huge step to take without having found a body. It signals a very high degree of confidence in their interpretation of the evidence they did have.
Which, at that point, must have been heavily reliant on that digital data. The GPS anomaly, the phone ping, the lack of SOS activation.
Almost certainly. They must have felt that circumstantial and digital evidence was compelling enough to rule out any realistic hope she was still alive and simply missing. They also added another crucial piece. They stated they believed one or more parties might have been involved.
Suggesting they were looking at a criminal act, not just an accident where someone panicked.
Correct, and they explicitly mentioned they were probing the possibility that her body had been removed from the initial location.
Which neatly explains why the massive 5-day search of Wuwukarong Park and Mount Clear hadn't found her, if she was taken from there.
Exactly. The hypothesis became incident at Mount Clear, followed by removal of the body. This narrative shift justified the failure of the initial search and cemented the reliance on the forensic trail left by the technology, rather than expecting physical evidence right at that 7-kilometer mark.
So the police narrative evolved quickly. Ruled out accident, established a likely criminal event at Mount Clear based on GPS, and suspected body removal. That sets the stage for a homicide investigation, even without the victim.
Precisely. It laid the groundwork for the next phase, identifying who might have been involved.
And that digital pinpoint at Mount Clear, combined presumably with other intelligence, led police relatively quickly to a suspect.
Remarkably quickly, considering the lack of a body. On March 6, 2024, just over a month after Samantha disappeared, police arrested Patrick Orrin Stevenson. He was 22 years old, from Scottsburn.
Scottsburn. How far is that from Ballarat or Mount Clear?
Scottsburn is a locality sort of southwest of Ballarat, putting him generally within the geographical area relevant to the incident and the potential disposal locations we'll discuss later. It wasn't like he was arrested hundreds of kilometers away.
And the charges followed almost immediately.
The very next day, March 7th, he was formally charged with murder. That speed, arresting one day and laying a murder charge the next, strongly suggests the police had built a very comprehensive circumstantial case before they made the arrest.
They must have felt confident they could already link him, through evidence, to that critical time and place.
That's the implication. They likely had evidence, perhaps his own digital footprint, like phone data, vehicle movements tracked by GPS or CCTV, maybe witness accounts placing his vehicle near Mount Clear around 7 a.m. that morning that lined up precisely with Samantha Murphy's GPS anomaly.
Now, initially, there was a suppression order on his name. Can you explain briefly why that happens in cases like this?
Sure. A suppression order is a court order temporarily preventing the media from publishing certain details, often the accused person's name or image. The main goal is to protect the integrity of the legal process.
How so?
Well, in a case with huge public interest and emotion, like this one, there's a risk that widespread media coverage focusing on the accused before a trial could prejudice potential jurors, or it might influence witnesses. The court tries to balance the public's right to know against the accused's right to a fair trial, free from undue prejudice.
And that suppression order was eventually lifted.
Yes, it was temporary. The court later decided the need for suppression was outweighed by other factors, possibly including the advanced stage of the investigation, or simply the principle of open justice.
The sources also mentioned something else, that on May 3, 2024, months after the murder charge, Stevenson faced fresh charges. What does that usually indicate?
Adding charges later on often suggests the ongoing investigation has uncovered evidence of additional separate criminal acts, usually related to the period after the alleged primary crime in this case, the murder.
So things related to the cover-up.
Exactly. Things like interfering with a corpse, destroying evidence, perverting the course of justice by lying to police or concealing evidence. These secondary charges can sometimes be used strategically by prosecutors, perhaps to strengthen the overall case, provide a fuller picture of the accused's actions for the jury, or maybe even encourage cooperation.
Let's dig into the police theory of the crime. They allege Stevenson murdered Murphy in what was described as a deliberate attack. That wording seems significant.
It's very significant legally. Deliberate attack points squarely towards intent mens rea, the guilty mind. It signals the police believe this wasn't accidental, wasn't manslaughter that resulted from a lesser assault, but that the intention was to kill or cause grievous bodily harm resulting in death. Proving that intent is crucial for a murder conviction, especially without a body providing direct evidence of the cause of death.
The sources don't specify a motive, but the deliberate part is key.
Correct. And another crucial element of the police hypothesis is the lack of any known connection between Stevenson and Samantha Murphy or her family.
They explicitly stated he wasn't known to the family. Why is that important?
It steers the investigation away from common motives like domestic disputes, feuds, or crimes involving people who know each other. It points more towards an opportunistic crime or a stranger-on-stranger attack. This focuses all the attention on that specific geographical point of intersection, Mount Clear, around 7 a.m. on February 4th, as the likely first and only significant contact.
So the alleged crime scene, according to police, is Mount Clear, the place marked by that GPS anomaly.
That's the core of their hypothesis. The digital data didn't just show where she stopped running, it pinpointed, in their view, the location of the fatal attack.
Which brings us back to the massive legal challenge. Prosecuting a murder charge without the body, the corpus delicti. How do prosecutors in Australia typically approach this? Can you actually get a conviction?
Yes, you can. It's difficult, but absolutely possible under Australian law. The prosecution has to build an overwhelmingly strong circumstantial case. They need to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt of several key things.
Okay, what are those things?
First, they have to prove that the alleged victim, Samantha Murphy, is actually dead. The police declaration helps, but they'll present evidence ruling out all other possibilities that she didn't just run away, isn't hiding, etc. Second, they must prove her death was caused by a criminal act, not an accident or natural causes. That's where the deliberate attack hypothesis comes in.
Right.
Third, and this is critical, they have to prove it was the accused, Patrick Stevenson, who committed that criminal act. This is where the digital forensics linking his movements to her disappearance at Mount Clear become paramount. And fourth, they often need to demonstrate evidence of consciousness of guilt actions taken by the accused after the crime to conceal it, like moving the body or disposing of evidence.
So that GPS anomaly essentially stands in for the physical crime scene evidence, and any evidence of him moving her or her belongings becomes proof of concealment and intent.
That's largely how it works in these cases. The digital timeline has to be incredibly robust, placing the accused at the crucial place at the crucial time. His digital footprint phone location, maybe car telematics, CCTV footage showing his vehicle needs to align perfectly with the moment her digital footprint shows that fatal disruption. That linkage becomes the substitute for finding his DNA at a traditional crime scene.
Okay, so for months, the case rested on this powerful but entirely circumstantial and digital evidence base. But then, in late May 2024, there was a major development. Physical evidence was found.
A very significant breakthrough. On May 29th, months after the arrest, searchers found Samantha Murphy's wallet, which contained her ID cards, and crucially, her mobile phone.
Finally, tangible items linking back to her. Where were they found?
They were discovered during a targeted police search near a place called Durham Lead.
Durham Lead. And where is that relative to Ballarat, Mount Clear, and Buninyong, where the phone last pinged?
Okay, let's trace the geography because it tells a story. Durham Lead is located about 20 kilometers or 12 miles south of the center of Ballarat. Importantly, it's also about 4 kilometers or 2.5 miles further south than Buninyong, the location of that last mobile phone tower ping.
So we have a clear geographical path emerging.
Exactly. We can now map out a likely sequence based on these locations. Point 1. Mount Clear, 7 kilometers into her run, the alleged location of the deliberate attack marked by the GPS anomaly. Point 2. Buninyong, 14 kilometers from her home, the area where her phone last connected to the network, suggesting the path of travel after the incident at Mount Clear. Point 3. Durham Lead, 20 kilometers south of Ballarat, the location where her phone and wallet were ultimately found, presumably disposed of.
Wow. Mount Clear attack, movement south through the Buninyong area, ending with disposal near Durham Lead. What does this geographical spread nearly 20 kilometers from the alleged crime scene tell investigators?
It tells them two critical things. First, it strongly corroborates the police theory of body removal and concealment. The evidence wasn't left at Mount Clear. It was actively moved a significant distance away. Second, the distance involved, roughly 20 kilometers through regional areas, almost certainly implies the use of a vehicle.
Right. You wouldn't carry items, let alone potentially a body, that far on foot easily.
No. It suggests a planned, deliberate effort to separate the victim and her belongings from the initial crime scene, likely to hinder the investigation and discovery. This effort itself supports the deliberate attack hypothesis and likely relates to those fresh charges we discussed, concealment of evidence or interfering with a corpse.
So the Buninyong ping wasn't the final resting place of the phone, just a point it passed through while still active, on its way further south to Durham Lead.
That seems the most logical interpretation of the sequence, yes. The phone was likely still on and connected to the network as it was being transported south, pinging the Buninyong Tower as it passed through that area before eventually being deactivated or losing batteries somewhere near Durham Lead where it was found.
The logistics involved in that alleged movement and disposal are quite considerable.
They are. It points to an immediate post-incident decision by the alleged perpetrator to engage in significant concealment activity, which, as you say, successfully delayed the discovery of these items for months, But finding them eventually at that location powerfully reinforces the geographical narrative constructed from the digital evidence.
And the sources mention her husband, Michael, instantly recognized the phone.
Yes, he confirmed it belonged to Samantha. A heartbreaking moment, no doubt, but forensically crucial.
But despite finding the wallet and phone, the fundamental agonizing reality remains.
Samantha Murphy's body has still not been found. That remains the central, unresolved aspect of the case. While the police clearly have enough evidence for the murder charge and these subsequent discoveries strengthen their circumstantial case, recovering her remains is paramount for the family's closure and would, of course, significantly simplify the prosecution's task in proving death and potentially cause of death.
This entire investigation unfolded under an incredibly intense public spotlight. The community response was massive, but as often happens, that became complicated.
Very complicated. It was definitely a double.
On the positive side, the community effort was huge, wasn't it? Especially after the official police search scaled back.
Absolutely immense. Local people in Ballarat, but also volunteers traveling from right across Victoria, refused to give up hope or stop looking. They continued organizing their own searches.
And this wasn't just random wandering. There was coordination involved.
Yes. In a very modern way, a local community member actually set up a large group on Facebook. The idea was to coordinate these volunteer search efforts, share legitimate information from police, maybe organize people into search grids for specific areas.
That sounds incredibly helpful, providing potentially thousands of extra pairs of eyes and boots on the ground.
And it was initially. It represented a huge amount of volunteer hours driven by genuine compassion and a desire to help. It definitely allowed police to dedicate more resources to the increasingly technical side of the investigation once it became clear this wasn't just a search and rescue mission.
It really shows that strong community spirit you often see in regional Australia during a crisis. But the very tool they use for coordination, social media, quickly became a major problem.
It really did.
What happened with that Facebook group and other online spaces?
As the group's membership exploded, thousands and thousands of people joining, it became almost impossible to manage. The signal got completely lost in the noise. The platform was just flooded with wild speculation, baseless rumors, intricate conspiracy theories.
And not just theories, but active interference.
Yes, you even had self-proclaimed psychic mediums joining in, offering visions, clues, and contacting police with supposed information derived from dreams or feelings. Similar activity apparently spilled onto other platforms like Reddit as well.
Now, you might think police can just ignore that noise, but it actively harms an investigation, doesn't it? How?
In several ways. First, investigators have a duty to assess information, so they end up having to waste precious time and resources chasing down or debunking completely false leads generated by online speculation. Every unfounded rumor about a sighting or a potential location has to be logged and checked just in case.
Diverting them from credible leads.
Exactly. Second, this flood of misinformation can actually contaminate the memories of genuine potential witnesses. Someone might read a compelling online theory and subconsciously incorporate elements of it into what they think they saw or heard. It muddies the waters for reliable testimony.
So the police were essentially fighting on two fronts, trying to find physical evidence hidden by the perpetrator and trying to navigate this blizzard of digital misinformation created by the public.
That's a very good way to put it. The online spaces became incredibly toxic. The volume of baseless accusations, armchair detective work, and frankly, online trolling became so counterproductive that the person who initially set up that main Facebook group, someone who was actually liaising with detectives, eventually argued for the group to be shut down.
Because the harm was outweighing the help.
Precisely. They recognized that what started as a tool for community support had devolved into something actively hindering the official investigation.
And this wasn't just a minor annoyance. It reached the very top of Victoria Police.
It did. The police commissioner himself, Shane Patton, had to make a public appeal, urging people to stop speculating online and to trust the official investigation process. For a commissioner to intervene like that shows just how seriously they viewed the negative impact this online chaos was having.
It really highlights a modern challenge for policing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do you manage the public's intense desire to be involved and informed in the digital age, while protecting the integrity and focus of a sensitive investigation?
It's a huge challenge. The same platforms that can mobilize incredible community support can also become vectors for harmful interference and resource drain. It's a constant balancing act.
Beyond the investigation process, experts also commented on the inherent nature of the crime itself. Forensic psychologist Tim Watson-Monroe called it very unusual.
Yes, his assessment highlighted just how peculiar the circumstances were. He specifically stated, based on his experience, that he'd never encountered a case quite like it, someone disappearing in this specific manner.
What makes it so unique in his view? The combination of factors.
I think so. It's not just a missing hiker lost deep in the wilderness. It's not a collapse miles from anywhere. It's the combination of a routine run in daylight hours on familiar territory near a regional city, tracked by GPS, and then the sudden, abrupt cessation of that routine activity at a precise point, strongly suggesting immediate external intervention.
Followed by the successful, albeit temporary, removal of the body and key evidence.
Exactly. The whole sequence, the planned run, the pinpointed 7 kilometers anomaly at Mount Clear, the immediate suspicion of foul play rather than accident, the subsequent evidence of body removal. It makes this case almost a textbook example of how a crime can be investigated primarily through its digital shadow when the physical evidence is initially absent. The first clues weren't footprints or fibers, they were bits and bytes traveling.
So, reflecting on this deep dive into Samantha Murphy's disappearance, it really underscores this fundamental shift in modern crime investigation. We see this constant tension, this interplay between the vast, challenging physical world and the precise, often invisible digital world.
Absolutely. We trace the key threads. Samantha Murphy vanishes on February 4th, 2024, during a planned run. A massive physical search yields little, but the technical investigation, zeroing in on that critical GPS anomaly at Mount Clear, backed by the phone ping near Buninyong, allows police to rapidly conclude foul play.
Which leads to the arrest and murder charge against Patrick Orrin Stevenson in early March 2024, even without having found Samantha. A decision based almost entirely, it seems, on that digital and circumstantial evidence.
And then months later, the discovery of her phone and wallet near Durham Lead provides that crucial physical corroboration. It validates the geographical narrative incident at Mount Clear, Transit South, disposal near Durham Lead, that police had likely already pieced together using digital forensics, presumably tracking the accused's movements alongside hers.
Looking at the bigger picture, what does this case tell us about where investigations are heading?
Well, it's a powerful example of the dual nature of modern policing, isn't it? On one hand, you have this critical, almost complete reliance on digital forensics. That trail of data from phones, watches, maybe vehicles, it's often the key to unlocking cases now. It was strong enough here to ground a murder charge without a body.
But on the other hand,
you have the immense challenge of managing the real-world consequences and the public's reaction, coordinating searches, sifting physical evidence when it is found, and critically, dealing with the flood of online information and speculation that can either help or massively hinder the process. That public engagement piece, especially online, is a huge factor now.
it really leaves us with a final thought, perhaps something for you, the listener, to mull over. We see this incredible power of digital location, data watches, phones, tracking our every move almost. Did that technology ultimately make finding Samantha Murphy easier? Or did it, in a way, complicate things?
That's the provocative question, isn't it? The GPS data seemingly pinpointed the moment and location of the crime with incredible precision, leading to an arrest. Yet, finding her physical person, and even her belongings, still took months of further searching and investigation after that digital breakthrough.
So does that suggest a limitation? That the tech can show us where something happened, but it still struggles to lead us directly to the physical results of that event when someone actively tries to conceal them?
Perhaps. It implies that while location technology is a revolutionary investigative tool, it might not be the complete solution, especially when faced with deliberate concealment. There's still a crucial, often difficult gap between the digital breadcrumb trail and recovering the physical reality on the ground. It underscores the enduring challenge of translating those precise data points back into tangible evidence and, most importantly, finding the missing.